All right, well, we have our next session is on finance, and I begin by reminding you what I said yesterday. Our problems are not essentially financial, but it's part of the picture. It's certainly the excuse that people give, it's the excuse that parents give for not using the schools, it's the excuse that pastors use for closing them or for bishops to close. So we have two seasoned, not to say old, but seasoned administrators, and I'm going to ask Father Davis to kick off and then Monsignor to follow, and then we'll have some general conversation.
I have been a priest for 31 years, and I have been a pastor at 3 different parishes, and I've worked at 4 high schools. One of the high schools, I was the supervising principal and president, and so I had everything to do with faith and finances in that role. Being part of parishes, quite frankly, that's exactly what the role of a priest is too, in terms of faith and finances. There must be adequate supervision of both the faith atmosphere and the fiscal realities of the parish. Just to share with you my most recent experience, I'm pastor of St. Gregory the Great Catholic Church and School in Plantation, which is just about 50 miles down the road south of us. And when I arrived at the parish, day one, the tuition accounts manager from my grade school came to give me a little bit of an overview, a report as to what the status was. She revealed that there were approximately 22 families who were delinquent on their tuition payments. The school year had already ended. I arrived in mid-June. The 8th grade had already graduated and left. There was more than $100,000 in arrears that had yet to be collected. And so she was stressed about that and wondering, what are we to do? And of course, this has everything to do with, the fiscal solvency of the institution. And at some point, my reaction is, okay, well, what faculty or staff member am I not going to be able to pay? If I can't collect all of the money that is supposed to be coming in responsible stewardship for the service of education that's being offered, it impacts the budget in some way. And it can be very adverse, and it can bind my hands in terms of decision making, and it may ultimately lead to some very difficult decisions. So my immediate response was, well, we've got to contact those families, as if this were some kind of special revelation that had to be done. And I said, well, I will write a letter. As regretful as I am as the new pastor of this parish, certainly not the first item of tone and introduction that I want to set, that I have to write a letter of ultimatum to a number of families. But ultimately, I had to say, you're in arrears. You have a responsibility to pay what you have agreed to pay. We have done our part. We have offered our services. We ask you now to follow through. Now, with regard to returning students, there's always the threat of dematriculation. I would not be offering any letters of recommendation to the high school that they desperately wanted to get into. You can use good old-fashioned Catholic guilt sometimes to let them know just how significant it is to follow through on their moral responsibility to do their part. I asked for a required meeting, asking them to indicate to me and explain why they couldn't pay. And by the way, we have a very generous financial aid program, and we have a tremendous endowment that enables us to take care of needy families. So it's not like we aren't willing to help, but these were folks that through either laziness or irresponsibility or whatever the case was, they did not follow through and do their part. And so, I would tell them in that meeting, which teacher do you not want me to pay? So it turned out that after those letters were sent out, not even one family wanted to come in and meet with me personally. but I gave them a date by which I wanted this resolved. All of them paid. It was 100% of that $100,000 came back in. And even for those who had already graduated and went on to, projected to go on to their high school. Maybe it's just the ask, maybe it's the demand, maybe it's raising the level of the conversation to a sense of responsibility. What's ethically correct here? It's about follow through. It's about someone who offers the leadership to say, this is what has to be done. This is the right thing to do. This is what you need to do to demonstrate responsibility. And so anyway, we successfully collected all of that. Surprisingly, I found out that there was no tuition agreement. There was just the published tuition rate. There was the way that tuition could be collected. Either you stop by the front office or you use fax tuition management. You have the direct bank debits, and those kinds of things, were in place. But there wasn't really a signed agreement saying, this is the amount that is required. These are the services we're providing. This is what you are to do, and this is the payment schedule. There wasn't any kind of an agreement, and nobody signed anything. Well, I said from now on, we're going to, because of legal concerns, we should have an agreement for the sake of the institution, for the financial wherewithal of the institution, holding people accountable. How can I, let's just say in the worst case scenario, you're going to take somebody to small claims court, or you're going to take somebody to some kind of an intervention conversation in which you have to present what their responsibilities are. Look, if you don't even have something in writing, if you don't even have something that's been signed and mutually agreed upon, how can you really demand the standard? So going forward, we decided we were going to have an annual tuition agreement, which they signed. And this year, for example, we collected $4.5 million. Not one penny was in arrears. So the idea of what I'm saying is, if we stay on top of things, what's the role of the priest, the supervising principal, the pastor, the chief financial administrator of the parish? Indeed, it is institutional solvency, financial solvency, but you have to keep your eye on the 8 ball. You've got to keep your eye on all of the various tangential factors in terms of administration. And I don't want to have to be in the business of having to chase people down. I don't want to be the tuition police. I don't want to be the one that is going to have to be in a confrontational or adversarial situation. But on the other hand, it is a question of responsibility, and we're in this together. And by the way, we are tuition driven. And so given the fact that the overwhelming majority of our monies at this point do come into us via tuition collection, and that's what I base my budget upon, I have to be assured that that money does come in. And so in one sense, this is a no-brainer. It's not rocket science that when you have a bill, you pay your bills. I mean, you're not going to go to the you're not going to be able to get on a Delta Airlines flight without a ticket that's already been paid for. You can't go to the grocery market and buy your weekly groceries unless you have cash or a credit card ready to go to make that payment. We do things in a way which we're supposed to be doing it in advance. We do our tuition charges 1 month in advance. And so we're always ahead of schedule in terms of the tuition payments. That enables the cash flow to be moving effectively. That enables us to pay our bills. And but again, it's a sense of responsibility, and somebody's got to keep that going. Now, I have never presumed that I need to kind of have a backseat policy on all of this. I have an active role in supervising. Supervision is absolutely critical. Supervision must be keeping our eyes on the spending and expenditures, but supervision has to also be in place to assure adequate revenue streams. And the key word here is supervision. It doesn't mean I have to do everything. I've got a tuition accounts manager. I have a budget director for the parish. I have an HR and accounts payable director. I have a team of financial people that work with me in the parish and in the school. So I don't feel like I have to do all the minutiae and have to be involved in every detail right on the front line, but sometimes I'm drawn into it. And as others were saying in our time together so far, personnel is key, so we want to have key people in key places. That's just one story of the parish that I have been at now only 2 years. But when you first arrive at a place, you can discover either Shangri-La or you can discover a place that needs open heart surgery. And we never know what we're going to encounter when we walk into a place. I'm of the opinion that a Catholic environment can be created when budgetary priorities reflect the mission. So if we are mission driven, we know what we're about as priests, as a Catholic school, as a Catholic parish, we know what the objectives are. We've already talked about them together. It has everything to do with salvation and our faith in Christ, and it has to do with the sacramental life of the church. But in order to make that happen, you have to have the right team of people, and you have to have all of the structures in place. We have to be very proactive in our planning. I hate to be reactive, but sometimes we priests are assigned into schools and into institutions where we have to react immediately. We have to take action on day one and not lose any time. And by the way, I don't want to lose time. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to be part of an institution that's a sinking ship. I don't want to be part of a scenario where I can't qualitatively impact its solvency and its success and the mission becoming alive right in front of my eyes. The whole idea is to work and to see, the kingdom of God come to fruition in our efforts. And that sometimes is hard to measure that, but we certainly know what the goal is, and we have to put all the constitutive parts in place to make that goal become reality. I went to a little parish called St. Jerome in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a parish that was in financial disarray when I first arrived there. And one of the questions we pastors ask when the keys are being handed off to us by a previous pastor is, how much money is in the bank? And so the outgoing pastor said $10. And I said, you got to be kidding me. What are you just, jerking my chain here. What are you talking about? He said, well, Michael, just get used to it. What comes in goes out. This is one of those kind of parishes where there's just not a lot of money. And so I realized that challenges would be abundant in the parish operation, the church operation of the parish, let alone what I found in the school. But just to give you one little insight as to what I did with that $10 parish, of course, the priest has to wear many hats. What's the role of the priest in terms of finances? At times we have to be involved in everything. And sometimes we have to be on the ground level doing what needs to be done. I mean, I was the sacristan, I was practically the janitor, I was taking care of air conditioning repairs and taking care of roof repairs. I was taking care of, my own cooking and my own laundry and the fax machine and the copy machine and the doorbell ringing and, the phone ringing, and it's on and on. It's all these kinds of things. When I entered the seminary years ago, I never suspected that I would be involved in those kind of things. I had the ideal vision that I would be involved in prayer and sacraments and retreats and spiritual direction and all kinds of holy things. And over the years, I have found out that the role of the priest involves everything. And so this little parish needed a lot of help. To fast forward the story, I had to come up with ways to think outside the box in order to increase the revenue stream, increase the student enrollment in my little grade school, which only had 278 students. And, once you get into the 200s and you're getting lower into the mid 200s and lower 200s, it's very hard to have somewhat of a profit margin that has a view towards, sustainability and building up options and advancing the cause to maybe new opportunities to bring about even further excellence in the school. It's very difficult if you don't have a strong revenue stream. And so, anyway, I did something that was kind of, at first glance, kind of silly, but on the other hand, it was thinking outside the box, and I just thought, well, let's give this a try and see what happens. I told some of you about this at breakfast. Just north of the Fort Lauderdale airport, so with thousands and thousands of people flying into the airport every day, my parish was only about a half a mile away from the airport. And as you're going on that circular exit road, it goes right by this enormous billboard that is right there on northbound US 1. And it occurred to me, what if I were to purchase that billboard and simply advertise, St. Jerome welcomes you to Fort Lauderdale? And what kind of a billboard would that look like? And so my development director, who I had hired at that time, said, "Father, we need a collar." I said, "I don't need to be on a billboard, but we need your collar," he said. And we happened to have a nun who was 95 years old, a happy lady, and in her full habit. She had a veil, a smiling sister, and served the church for a whole lifetime. And so we happened to take a picture of the two of us, incredible smiles, ear to ear, and it was a very warm feeling tone. And our picture was there. Thousands of people seeing it every day. St. Jerome welcomes you to Fort Lauderdale. It didn't even have our address. It didn't have directions. It didn't have arrows. It didn't have the email. It didn't have the phone number. It just said St. Jerome welcomes you to Fort Lauderdale. Well, I think people began to think this was the most prominent church in Fort Lauderdale as they were arriving. And it ended up that my parish was right next to the airport, but it was also right next to Port Everglades, which is the cruise port. And so all kinds of people coming in and out to take cruises. They would go out, but then they would come back in, and frequently the cruises would arrive on a Sunday morning. And so what did I see happen? Taxis were arriving with people who were coming off of the cruise boats because they remembered St. Jerome welcomes you to Fort Lauderdale. And they came and they attended Mass. They had luggage in hand. They put their luggage in the back of the church, and then they went and they took their seats. Not only did attendance go up, but money went up. The collection went up. And what ended up happening as an ancillary boost to our mission was that somehow the prominence of that billboard and the public perception began to draw people's interest. Oh, you have a grade school? And we went from 278 to 325 students. Well, a 48 student increase for a little school in a small little neighborhood that's an industrial area and doesn't have much of a demographic group of people to draw from was a huge impetus to our economic wherewithal. So in any case, after I left there, after a brief 2 years, the parish that had $10 in the bank, I left it with $500,000 in the bank and an increase in our student enrollment. So I suppose what I'm saying is that because I was involved in everything that needed to be done at the parish, all the grunt work, as well as thinking outside the box and doing things differently that might be, quite unusual to our normal way of presenting ourselves to our various publics, somehow it began to turn the corner, and that little parish was stabilized. I went into a high school that was called Archbishop Carroll High School down in Miami. I was the supervising principal and president there. I went there, it had already been open for 2 years. And so I arrived after its first 2 years. Wow, there were lots of challenges that I had to deal with in trying to put together and really carve a school out of the Everglades. It was way out west. But the problem is, being a new school, a lot of times, unless there's not a lot of care given to making good choices as far as personnel and putting the structure together, things can flounder, things can get out of control, things are not necessarily going to be oriented towards success. I suppose I could have waited for organic change to take place over the course of time. You can wait it out, and sometimes change just naturally happens. On the other hand, there are some places that we're assigned to that need emergency interventions. And we've said so often how personnel is policy. It had everything to do with the personnel. I was first assigned there as chaplain, so I was also teaching religion, and I was on one side of the hallway teaching religious principles and the faith and church history, and on the other side of the hallway was a man who was a professed atheist, and this was in a Catholic school. Many faculty members were non-practicing Catholics, nominal Catholics, disgruntled Catholics, and in this case there was an atheist. And so I'm teaching one thing on one side of the classroom, and he was teaching another thing on the other side of the classroom, and it was just pulling the carpet out from underneath of me. And of course, he was real creative and rebellious and everything else, and of course that feeds right into the adolescent mindset, doesn't it? They want to be part of the rebellion of it all. And so it ended up that I was named supervising principal and president in January of that year, so after the first semester. And what do you know? I decided not to renew the contracts of 13 faculty members, including that atheist. So what ended up happening was I changed the whole environment by hiring a new crop of people. I personally interviewed them. I personally asked them faith questions. I personally wanted to assure that they were with me in terms of the mission. And to really fast forward the story, because I was there 8 years, we had to have the tuition agreements. We had to, create a tuition schedule that was going to, meet the needs and meet the budget. We had to put the personnel that could fit into that budget. And I had to look at the full, complexity of institutional organization. And so I'll get back to I'll give you the punchline first, and then I'm going to explain a few things, and I'm going to get back to the punchline. The punchline is, at the end of my 8-year term, we were honored as being among the top 25 Catholic high schools in the United States for having the most clear Catholic identity. Now, how did I get there? It had to do with financial decisions. It had to do with personnel decisions. It had to do with bringing on board religious deacons and priests. At one point in the heyday of my tenure there, we had 4 Carmelite sisters from Los Angeles who were on the staff. I had 4 Daughters of Mary, Mother of Mercy from Nigeria. I had 1 sister of the Immaculate Heart of Mary sisters from Madrid, Spain. I brought 2 permanent deacons on board, and I brought 2 other priests in addition to myself on board. We had an unbelievable staff. I had grown up in a Catholic high school that had, 10 priests and as many nuns, and so I was used to that as a format of how to create a real strong Catholic identity. Once you get that kind of momentum going, cash easily comes in because people see what we stand for very clearly. In the absence of that, very challenging decisions have to be made. Now let's look at some of the financial aspects for a moment. First of all, we are tuition driven. So tuition is really the epicenter of the revenue stream for all of us. Just tuition is the main source of revenue for us, but let's not underestimate the other prongs of revenue that come into an institution. There's additional internal sources beyond the tuition schedule. Let's not underestimate the significance of income that comes into the institution via the athletic program. There's all kinds of examples that we can think of, including tickets to games and including refreshment sales and including different kinds of sponsorships of extracurricular activities and sporting events. There is a lot of income that can come into a school via bookstores and gift shops. We opened up a bookstore for the very first time that wasn't there before I got there. It seemed to me that we could easily put together a store that we're selling our textbooks, our workbooks, our school supplies, our uniforms, our sweatshirts, our jackets, our athletic clothing. It turned out to be a very lucrative source of income. We opened up our own cafeteria. At first it was difficult because of the challenging schedule of everything being structured in such a way that we move from bell to bell and classroom to classroom, and there's not a lot of time for the lunch period. So we really couldn't have enough time to collect all the money from each individual person as they were going through the lunch line, especially when they were all bringing different items for their lunch on a tray, and we had to calculate which one was which and tally it up and collect the money and that sort of thing. And that tends to be the normal approach, but we decided to think outside the box, at least at that time, and we decided to add a food cafeteria fee paid in advance as part of the tuition structure so that everyone would just have essentially free provisions in the cafeteria. They walked in, they took their 3 or 4 or 5 items, they went out and sat in the cafeteria and had their lunch. It saved time, it saved concerns and worries about how we're going to collect the money or how we're going to count up the money and deposit the money every day. We tried to eliminate some of the complexities of the daily collection. So we just incorporated it into the tuition schedule, and it was paid in advance. And it just simplified our lives enormously, but it also created a tremendous profit margin for us. There's special services, there's after-school services and extracurriculars, and there's, especially in grade schools. In my own grade school right now, the families have to pay an extra fee if they want the kids to stay in an after-school program with appropriate supervision and activities and tutoring. Those are internal sources. Then what's another realm of revenue stream for us, a very important aspect of institutional life? You should have a development office, an institutional advancement office. Now you have to have somebody that can really lead the charge and know what they're doing, but at some point that has to be cultivated because there's many different ways of fundraising that can take place. But it's not just fundraising, it's a culture of advancement, of public relations, of marketing, of media, of advertisements, of website and school newsletters and mass mailings. You got to create the environment where people want to invest, where they want to matriculate, where they want to be part of the cause, and they know they're contributing to be part of a very important cause. I think in terms of development, we have to be concerned that the pastor, the supervising principal, the principal, him or herself, has got to be very focused on student retention as well as student recruitment. You'd be surprised to hear what I did in those early days. I mean, I had to figure out a way to increase the tuition revenue stream. That means more students. More students means more money. And so what I did, I wasn't beyond doing anything. I went out to every parish in the area and I talked about the laurels of our high school. I went out to every CCD and I talked about, have you ever thought about Catholic education? I went out one day with a group of kids to give them some service hours to help me. We went out to parking lots of strip malls and shopping centers, and we put flyers on the windshield of every car, advertising Archbishop Carroll High School. We had a carnival and decided to try to raise some money and some fun and some community building via a carnival, but it wasn't just that. I got one of those high beam spotlights that shine up in the up in the sky, in the nighttime sky, and people were drawn to our property who had never been there before, and they saw that there's a Catholic high school out here. Sometimes we have to do things that attract attention, that can market ourselves. We can draw people's interest in our program. Look, you get them in the door and you can have a conversation with them, and you'd be surprised what that conversation will merit. Recruitment. As recruitment went up, our financial strength went up, our ability to do new things went up, our ability to enhance the program went up. Various fundraising initiatives, the annual fund, auctions, dinner dances, carnivals, alumni association was a very significant initiative that we put in place with every graduating class. We inaugurated them into the alumni association, and we kept in touch with them, thanking them for their journey with us and looking forward to their future support. Of course, when I first got there, this was a new school, so they're going to be going on to college. They don't have an income yet, so they're not exactly going to be giving us money. But at some point, it's about relationship development and putting them in position to have a long-term relationship with their school, with their alma mater. We fostered a program of planned giving and bequeaths, and we actually received some in those early years from grandparents who were so appreciative of what we were doing for their grandchildren. We had a grandparents' day in anticipation of what may happen to be a benefit to us in the long term, and it has turned out to produce good fruit for us. Sponsorships of initiatives, athletic sponsorships, team booster clubs. I'll never forget how we, I announced what we had a need for. We need a scoreboard on our football field. Again, this is a brand new school. We have very limited resources and the supplies. And I made the case. This is an important priority. Let's have a scoreboard. It's going to cost X number of dollars. Can you help me with this? Well, people heard the articulated need. I told them the price. I invited their contributions to address the need. We had a formal installation and unveiling of the new scoreboard, and then we celebrated its use. And then I began again with that same methodology. I remember how we needed additional bleachers. And I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had bleachers on both sides of the athletic field? Because, there's rivalries between schools and everything else. So we need to have the opponents on one side and us on the other side. And I said, couldn't we have some bleachers? And I said, this is the need. Here's what the price is. I'd like some help with that. Help me acquire this to advance the enhancement of our sports fields. The monies began coming in. Some people, their buttons are pushed by very specific needs. If you articulate specific needs, I can do that. They don't like to give just to general things, a general fund, an abstract way of giving. A key principle in terms of development and institutional advancement is that you present specific needs. I need this money, and here's what it's going to, and guess what? I've spent it on this, and here is the proof in the pudding. I can show it to you. This is what we've done with your resources, and thank you for your loyalty. You'd be surprised at how many community restaurants in the area who they like good public relations and interaction with the neighborhood and with other institutions in the neighborhood, who, when we advertise, go to Pollo Tropical, for example, to have some chicken and some rice and beans, we'll give, they mention that you're from Archbishop Carroll, we'll give you a 10% rebate that'll come back to us. And we'll give that as a donation to the school. Might seem small, but all these little things, when you put it together as part of a big fabric in terms of fundraising, ends up to net you some income and some revenue stream that you otherwise wouldn't have. Even Amazon Smile, for example. How many of our people are going on Amazon to make purchases? They register themselves with Amazon to benefit a specific institution. And so it's not a percentage of what you pay for the product, it's the percentage of sales that Amazon will then send you a check in support of your people using their services. How many banks have credit cards that will bring back points and resources to the institution? How many of our banks, we just moved to a new bank entitled TD Bank, and they will give us a $100 credit for every person who opens up a bank account at their bank. Well, I mean, you get 100 people, you get a couple hundred people out of a large group of folks who are part of your student body, your families, your parishioners, and all of a sudden you have another revenue stream. We have a tremendous sense of endowment and investments in our Catholic Community Foundation for our Catholic parishes and schools. This year alone, the interest on our investment garnered for us at St. Gregory, where I currently work, upwards of $400,000 that were able to be distributed. It was distributable income that came from our investments. It was interest income, and that is annual. And I try not to specifically program that into the budget so that it is it's essential dollars that I need to operate the budget. I prefer that the operational budget be based on a cost-based analysis of tuition charges. So you charge the tuition that meets all the basic expenses. Everything else should be gravy. So that $400,000 enables me to do other kinds of things, to do advanced planning, forward-looking planning, to be proactive and see what our needs are down the road and in the future. But to have investments and to have endowment income, they're just tremendous. So those are some initiatives that happen within the Development Office and the Institutional Advancement Office. And then there, of course, are external supports to the budget. And all of this has to do with us, brothers. It has to do with us because we have to supervise this. That may mean that we are just kind of above the whole operation, but it means that we're giving vision to it and direction. We're telling our advancement directors and our institutional advancement directors what they need to be doing and what they need to be focused on. Surely they are professionals and they know how to do these kinds of things, but it's also important for them to reflect the mind of the administrator, the mind of the pastor, the mind of the one who's offering the spiritual and thematic leadership of the institution. And so I take very seriously the important role of the development director or the director of institutional advancement. The final revenue stream would be external support to the budget. So we've had tuition, we've had internal sources, we've had the development office initiatives, and now we have external support to the budget. And there are sometimes parish subsidies. If you're in a high school, maybe there are parishes that contribute to the regional high school. If you are, in a Catholic elementary school, perhaps there's two different budgets. There's the school budget and then there's the parish budget. But there may be advantages that Catholic parishioners would receive by going to their own Catholic elementary school. And we try to make it lucrative for our visiting Catholic children who come from parishes that don't have grade schools, and we recruit them and tell their pastors, we're not interested in stealing your parishioners. We would just like to offer Catholic education and make sure your kids who don't have a Catholic school to choose from, they might choose ours, and we'll give you the same parishioner rate, or we'll give you the same benefits that we give our own children. That helps with student enrollment, that helps with revenue, but it also is a way in which the parish can provide different kinds of subsidies. Even the parish might contribute to what may be described as a regional Catholic elementary school, and every parish contributes something to the number of children that are attending that. There's state corporate scholarships, there's grants and grant writing, corporate matching of funds for charities, there's spontaneous donors. Let's not underestimate, again, those examples that I gave where you identify a need, you tell what the price is, and you celebrate the accomplishment of that need and the installation of that item. Why is it important for us priests to know all of this? It's because we're the front man. We're the ones that are kind of like the ambassador of the mission at the highest level. We're the one that articulates the mission. We're the one that articulates the vision. We're the one that inspires people to respond. We are, hopefully inspirational speakers and motivational speakers that are so passionate about what we believe in terms of Catholic schools. We want them to be involved in the same cause. And so, to be frank, we have to have a certain amount of passion and energy in our way of relating with others in order to sell the cause, in order to get people on board to assist us. Now, getting back to Archbishop Carroll High School, was it organic change that I waited for, or was it an emergency intervention? And I would say that school and some schools require emergency intervention. They require open heart surgery. I had to get rid of the atheist. I had to get rid of the non-practicing people who were just dead weight. They're dragging me back. They're holding me back from accomplishing what I need to accomplish. And so it's about being clear on the mission. I was taking a look at the curriculum and making sure we had a good curriculum, as I was reflecting last night in that example of that book that I discovered. Sometimes, you're kind of above doing supervision, but supervision sometimes pulls us right down into the lower levels in which we have to deal with the nuts and bolts, and we have to take care of that. But at the very least, we need to be moving in the direction of positioning personnel that can do all of that for us and with us, and responding to our leadership initiatives on behalf of the mission. So I was very proud of what we were able to accomplish at the high school, because in the course of a short, really it was a 6-year journey of when I recruited all of those religious sisters, when I brought the deacons, when I brought the priests on board. We changed the religion curriculum. We've got a full-time campus minister. We had a retreat program. We had confessions regularly available. We had chaplaincy available. We had a Eucharistic adoration. We had rosary. We had just all kinds of things that created the Catholic atmosphere. And we would articulate that then to our viewing publics, all of the people that I was trying to recruit in the various parishes and the various institutions to build up our program. All of that became that which was the fertile ground to build up our ability to recruit and therefore increase the revenue stream as tuition dollars and investment in our cause came in. You can delegate, and we should. We shouldn't necessarily have to be micromanagers at our level. But especially when you go into an institution that requires open heart surgery, you really have to get down into the nitty-gritty of it all, and you have to do what needs to be done to advance the needle, to move the institution forward. It requires a lot of work. I sometimes, say under my breath, I practically lost my health having to deal with those 8 years that I was there at that high school trying to turn it around. Someone mentioned, coaches dropping the F-bomb and different things like that. I had to fire our head football coach. I had to fire a baseball coach. We had to get the right people witnessing to the right values to create the right tone to make sure that we were being conscientious about our treasured Catholic identity and the values that make us the institution that we were designed and meant to be and inspired to be. I will tell you, it comes with crosses to carry. If you go in as a transformational leader, if you go in as someone who is bound and determined to make all the kinds of changes that are required in this type of an institution that is so bereft of basic Catholic values and personnel, be ready for the crows and the hawks to come after you. I remember after I fired the baseball coach, I was chased home in my car by disgruntled parents who were upset with me. I received hate mail. I received death threats on voicemail and emails. I had the front lawn of my house, or the rectory house that I was living at the time, the front lawn, the garbage and the mailbox, they were all set on fire one night. And so be ready. If you're wanting to do the transformational leadership that needs to be done, and by the way, the cause is great, it's worth it, we need to do it, we stand for something that's clear. We cannot abdicate our responsibility, and pastors and priest principals and leaders of educational institutions, all of us have to do exactly what's right for the sake of the cause. Catholic identity is too important. I'm not going to waste my time with all the millions of dollars that we have to spend to keep Catholic schools open if it's not going to reflect the Catholic ethos. It has to be absolutely Catholic, true and true, through and through, and we need to be clear on what we're about to do. Now, be ready for the task, because it's a big task. You know what I'm talking about. We're here because we all have passionate concerns about this. We want to advance the cause. But priests have to be involved in the finances, have to be involved in the structure, have to be involved in the personnel, have to be involved in every aspect of the total picture of the educational institution in order to make the mission become reality. So getting back to my thesis statement, a Catholic environment can be created when budgetary priorities reflect the mission, and the priest role is fiscal supervision on expenditures and spending, and fiscal supervision when it comes to assuring adequate revenue streams. It's easy to do cutting back. It's easy to cut expenses. It's harder to do the revenue stream, and that's where you need to spend most of your time.